Welcome, Maggie. Nice to have you
Thanks.
here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I so appreciate your invitation to join you.
Well, I'm so appreciative that you're here. It's really exciting. Like when I read on my blog that you're actually happy with your situation where you're standing with your papers and your finances, I thought, well, that's somebody that I need to interview. Because normally I hear all these stories where people are really not happy, and it was so refreshing to read something different. So, yeah, so why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? What are you doing? What's your story?
Sure. I am a career coach and I work primarily with introverts. I work with people on everything from getting focused about what they want to do and also being in a job search. So, I'm really kind of all over the place with that process and help people with every segment.
And so when you went through I guess you did some education, I believe you have some master's degree and everything. So did that help you in any way to get prepared for what you're doing now?
Yeah, I do have a master's degree in counseling and career development, and I took a little bit of a detour, which is part of what brought me really to career coaching because I started coaching. I got a personal coach in 2005 when I wanted to lose weight. So I got a weight loss coach, and I had never really even heard of coaching, but I just this offhand comment from a friend of mine sparked this idea in me. And so I went to Google, and this was before coaching was really mainstream. But I hired somebody, and it was so extraordinary the way she talked to me that I felt like just transformed in the sessions. And I thought, this is what I'm going to do. This is my work. And it was really when coaching was in a different era. So people thought, you were an athletic coach, or like they didn't understand what life coaching was, and I didn't really know how to represent myself very well. So I thought, oh, I need to get a counseling degree. That's going to solve my problems. If I have credentialing, people are going to understand. And so I spent actually a total of 6 years. I only spent 4 years in my degree program, but I spent 2 additional years getting licensed in mental health, which was a real detour. And what I realized was, I call it a credentialing gremlin, where I thought if I just figured out how to get enough letters after my name, everyone would take me seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took me into the career realm sort of through a circuitous route. And I realized that's what a lot of people do when they want to make a career change, is they think, I want to go back to school. That's what's going to be the route that makes sense, not necessarily the easiest route, but the one that makes sense. And it really takes people often in a detour that they don't need. And so that's part of what I work with people on, is what really do you need in order to make a change?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sounds interesting. Yeah. But isn't it often like that you do think you need credentials or you do need a certificate because that's kind of what society tells us, or what you think you need for the job market, like proof that you know what you're talking about, like
Mhm.
as if life experience isn't good enough kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, it's very seductive too. And I've worked in career centers on college campuses, and that is a portal for people to find access to employers, because employers are paying to have spots in career fairs and spots on interview sites,
Mm-hmm.
and with people who are recent graduates. So it's sort of this false arena where you you do have access much more readily than you do in the open job market, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a limited time, and it's it can be a tricky place to navigate a new job too. So yeah, you can get tripped up pretty easily there too.
Yeah, yeah. So any of this education you did, the detour and the one that actually serves you now well, did that in any way prepare you for being an entrepreneur or self-employed in terms of finances, paperwork, organization, how to motivate yourself during the day or anything?
No, none of it. All of that is self-taught. All of that I've learned through scrambling, really, and desperation. There have been many times when I've wanted to go back to a salaried position because I've felt so disoriented by the process of marketing myself. Like, and I hear that from a lot of other coaches where we love the work of being with clients and feel so energized by that process. But the part about selling ourselves, finding out how to optimize our websites, what are the platforms that we use to fill the pipeline so we have clients coming in, all of that has been through either reading or courses or coaches that I've had, or I've been in some mastermind groups that have really been pivotal for me too.
Isn't it sad that actually our education system or whatever doesn't prepare us at all? They all make us just be prepared to be an employee, but not to be an entrepreneur or self-employed or anything. There is not really anything out there, at least as far as I know, that would prepare you for it. We're all struggling, and some better, some not as good. So yeah.
Yes, I agree.
So what was your process? Where do you coming from? Like from the struggling, and then how did you get to the point where you can say, I actually feel good about it now, which is so refreshing to hear.
Yeah, well, it's funny because when I was reflecting on this interview and thinking about some of my processes, it really started in my personal finances. And one of the things that I did, because my personal finances were a mess, really before I started coaching, and even through some of the early years of coaching, I had a lot of magical thinking, and I thought, it's kind of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. But I didn't have the infrastructure around it, and I kind of had some sense of entitlement. Like I always thought, oh, my mom will bail me out, or like I've always had sort of a financial cushion.
Mm-hmm.
So it just seemed like, oh, I can take these risks and make really stupid financial decisions. In fact, just really 1 month ago, my husband and I paid off all of our credit card debt. So
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. Because it has been, we've been married 20 years, and we've had, since almost the beginning of our marriage, we were both in kind of magical thinking, and we incurred very substantial credit card debt. And so it took a long time to confront what we were doing in a way that was really positive for our marriage and not accusatory. And also, it peeled, like the initial place I think that we went was in shame and in, blaming the other person, or, just like trying to weasel out of it without really looking at it and doing a systematic approach to taking responsibility for the hole that we had dug. So one of the key things that I did was I took a class with, it was actually the last time Barbara Stanny taught her overcoming under earning class herself. She's got some coaches that work for her, at least one who teaches the class. But when I took it, and she said, this is the last time I'm going to be the instructor for this class. And it was transformative to be in that class, because I had read some Susie Orman and kind of dabbled a little bit with like what I was doing with my money and how I was playing out a lot of scripts that I wasn't aware of. But it wasn't until I was in that class with Barbara Stanny, and she's a really good coach. She really hears people, and she'll get straight to the heart of what's going on. And so hearing her coach other people and having her coach me, that was the turning point for me when I made a commitment to track all my spending, to do my Quicken every week. And it was like being on a diet. You know, I would be really pure about it for a while, and then I would just, you know, like throw it all. It was like the pendulum swinging. So it took me a while to really get into that routine, and I kept having to peel back what it was that was blocking me. And usually it was underlying beliefs. It was my own fear of my success. And it was some money scripts too from my family. Like my mom came from a lot of wealth, and she's kind of ashamed of it because her family made money in the coal mines, and she feels like that's a complete clash with her values. And she has this idea that rich people are emotionally bankrupt because her parents were so distant from her emotionally. And it was the domestic staff, like the maid, who were loving and nurturing to her. And so she's over 70, and she still has this idea that if she has too much money, she will lose her emotional center and her emotional connections to people. And so for me to uncover that that's her legacy to me, and realize, you know what, I can have money and have emotional depth. That took a lot for me.
Yeah, isn't it funny how the stories that come from the childhood or from wherever, from the environment, how they have such a big impression on us and on money. And like the other day, I read that article about whether or not the wealth have an advantage in thinking about money. And I do believe they do. Like the article kind of implied they don't, because everybody has the same chance to make money. But I think they do have an advantage because they grow up in an environment where the thinking is different. Now, with your mother, it was the opposite. She kind of went on the opposite of it. But often it is the mindset of the wealth that helped then the children to have a good mindset about money. So I do believe that the childhood is and the parents and the environment where you grow up is instrumental, whether you can deal good with money or not. So
Yeah, I agree. In
yeah.
fact, one of the things that I've done with people, because money is a big part of career change, is I ask people to fill in the sentence stem, rich people are, and to fill it in several times, because that can really get down to some of what we believe about money and whether how we'll deal with it when we have money, and whether we just like literally deserve it. So I think that's a really insightful probe to answer that question. Rich people are.
So would you agree then that, like, if people like in private finances or as an entrepreneur, if they have trouble with finances and paperwork, it's a two way thing. It's one, they may not know how to actually deal with it like on an organizational matter, but much more important is the mindset. And you can teach them probably all you want about how to be organized or how to organize it or how to do a budget and to track your spending. As long as the mindset doesn't change, then nothing is going to change.
Yes, I think that's actually the heart of it. And I think it's true about career too, where people have ideas and dreams about what they want to create. And yet, if they have some underlying beliefs that are blocking that, it doesn't matter how much you teach them how to do a resume, or in your case, teach them how to organize their paperwork. If the foundation of what's underneath that is a belief that I can't manage this, or my community will disown me, then that is what will fuel their behavior more than the new input about, oh, here's this 7-step process for doing this. They won't follow it because we're, and I found that to be true for myself. Whenever I notice my own behavior around money getting derailed from what I know is really important, like if I'm not sending out my invoices, or if I'm not tracking my Quicken, then I'm looking, I know, oh, it's like a red alert. I've got to look at what's the new thing that's blocking me. It's kind of like peeling back an onion. I'm uncovering yet another layer of my own struggle.
Yeah, but I think you mentioned diet just a few minutes ago, and I'm thinking, but most people don't want to, or maybe are not aware or don't want it to be a process, like you say, that you have to actually always be aware of it. They kind of look for the magic pill, just like in diet, no? Like you would like the cake and the chocolate and everything and still not gain weight. And it's a little bit the same with paperwork and finances. I find that they really want to get organized. They really want to get a handle on it, but they don't want to do the work. They want to just like learn it maybe in a 3-day course or something, and then all is well. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I also think that there's some piece too of, there's a lot of fear that, I'll never be able to have chocolate again, or I'll never be able to spend money again,
Yes.
or, and so it's looking at, can you tolerate that discomfort in the practice of learning? It's sort of like, sure, you can spend money, sure, you can have chocolate, but don't do it in a reactionary way.
Yes.
Do it in a way that's intentional. And that's what I think the practices that you're teaching and the processes that you're teaching is, it's asking people to have their behavior come from intention rather than reaction.
Yes, and also when they feel triggered to spend or eat chocolate or whatever, to actually really think about it. Why? Like, is it really because I want this now, or is not something else missing in my life, or something else is not okay?
Yeah, or I'm trying to run from something I think I can't tolerate, right? Like numb out or hide. Yeah. Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah. So what are your like some of your daily practices or weekly, or what are you doing to keep track of your finances, or to keep your paperwork organized? Do you have some special routines, or what are you like? You mentioned before before we had the interview that you had some belief, or some stuff or some systems didn't work for you. You had to shed them off, and then others you implemented now in your life. So what are some of the systems or things you're doing on a regular basis that keep you on track?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that I do. And one is I have anchor days where Mondays I do my invoicing. And I have different practices with different clients. Like some clients I will invoice monthly, some I'll invoice twice a month, some I'll invoice weekly. But every Monday I review my list of invoicing. So in fact, we're recording this on a Tuesday, and last night I had not done my invoicing, and I said, I am not going to bed until I do this. And some of that is a promise to me, and some of that is to follow through with what I've told my clients. I had a coach very early when I was receiving coaching who was terrible about invoicing. And I felt like, first of all, it really, because at that time too, I was really struggling with my own money. And so when she would invoice me and I would get this really big bill because she hadn't invoiced in a while, that would very much derail me. I would have, and so then there would be some icky energy between us, but also it really didn't reflect well on her. Like I had some judgment about that. And so I've tried to have that be a way that I maintain integrity with myself and with my clients. So that's my first anchor day. The second anchor day is Fridays, and that's when I do my personal Quicken, and I update all my accounts, and I look and set I love electronic. When I first started it, you couldn't schedule out which date you were going to do an electronic payment. And, I'd have to figure out, write the check and then like put a reminder for when I was going to mail it and things like that. But now I love that. So, cause I can just take care of it. And so I take care of everything on Friday. And then what I also do, so I have those anchor days. And then the other thing I do is just for this things that there's very few, but there's still some that come through the mail. So when I get something through the mail, I have a spot on my desk that I set it. And I always, within 48 hours, I will attend to it. So those are some of my kind of rituals, I guess, and practices that I use pretty faithfully.
Yeah, routines. It's interesting how you call them anchor days, because I wrote a blog post about it, how routines can be your anchors, and they kind of can keep you in the right direction, especially in times of turmoil. Like if life gets stressful or whatever, if you have these days and you don't question them, just do them, because they are Mondays I do this and Friday I do this, and you do this, it kind of keeps you stable and on track. So
well, and one of the other things that's really good about it for me is if I'm not doing it, if I skip it, then it's a signal to me like that I have some work I need to do. Like I need to talk to my own coach about what's going on for me. Why am I avoiding this? It's a way for me to stay in integrity with myself. So it's kind of a way to monitor my own pulse around how I'm just believing about my business growth and also about what I'm contributing. And it's a really good, it's almost like the canary in the coal mine. It's the first signal to me that I'm like, oh, I have some things I need to clean up, some things I need to work on.
I do find also with my work with my clients and everything, that if you have a mess like in paperwork and finances, it's most likely you have kind of a mess in your life in general, and it also is really heavy on your shoulders, and you're never really free to go after your dream or to do in your business what you want to do, because you always have that, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's really heavy on your shoulder. And that's what surprises me sometimes, that people are not willing to lift this weight and do something about it, because they would feel so much better. So what do you think, why is it that people have such a hard time with it, that to actually really do something about it?
Yeah. Well, there's two reasons. And one is, this is something I got from Kate Northrup, who I love her YouTube series where she interviews people. But early on her YouTube channel, she had just some tips that she gave personally about her own practices and around her own book. And one of them was to, how there's this, a lot of people keep a gratitude list where at the end of the day, they talk about the places where they feel grateful. But hers has a slight twist. And I'm not sure if she calls it a value list, but it's really to make a list every day about where I generated value, where I contributed. And that practice, I did that for months. And it was a turning point for me, because I realized I really wasn't valuing what I was creating, not just in my business, but even in my family and in my interactions. I really didn't think I had value. And some of her teachings really helped me, where she talked about all money is an exchange of value for value. And so once I could recognize my own value through this list, where I was doing it every night, and sometimes it would be just things like I made my kids lunch for school, or it would also be I do my family finances, or when I would really look at the totality of where I felt like I'm contributing. Sometimes it would even be, and I think Kate Northrup uses these examples, just smiling at someone or opening the door for them. But it just sort of like saying, I matter. And to record that and to allow myself to recognize it was a huge change for me, because I think that fundamentally is at the heart of what so many of us struggle with, is like, I'm not worthy, I don't deserve. And so it's like, I don't deserve to clean up this paperwork mess or this struggle that I'm having, because it is in some ways like an outer manifestation of the inner experience that I have. So that's the first thing. The second thing that was really pivotal for me was a coach whose name is Carrie Nola, and her first name is spelled Keri, and she works mostly with therapists because she's a therapist herself, but she does practice building support for therapists. And I got to work with her in a very pivotal session I had with her, and she talked about managing our fears, where we get really derailed by our own fears. And there was something about her language about that, where she said, if we can become aware of our own fears and manage them from a place of intentionality, it's a game changer. And for me, that was really true, because I realized I have and have worked and grappled with my own fear of success. And my own, it's that Marianne Williamson quote, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, it's that we are powerful beyond measure.
Yes.
And I think that has been really true for me, that whenever I find myself becoming successful and starting to create what I want, it'll shut me down, because I don't know. I'm afraid I don't know what to do. And so one of the things that Carrie taught me is how to recognize my fear, and then how to really gently attend to myself, so that, like, not be mean to myself, like, how can you be feeling that way? Or that's ridiculous, using that mean girl voice, but really holding that part of myself gently and allowing that fear to be present and yet still acting. So I think those are the two things that really shut people down, where it's like, we can look at our mess and know, I have to clean this up. Yes. But if we don't believe that we're worthy, and if we're not aware of our fears, then I feel like that shuts it down.
Yeah. And do you feel that, like from your experience, that this is more women have a problem with the self-worth and all that? Because often it seems that men are more organized with finances and stuff like that than women are. Do you think that has a direct correlation with it, that women in general feel a little bit less, or have more issues around their self-worth and valuing themselves and everything?
I think it shows up in women, particularly around, Brene Brown says that our shame shows up for women around food and body image. And I also think, when I was doing weight loss coaching, I feel like outward clutter for women especially, is a manifestation of inner turmoil. I think men really struggle, and Brene Brown says this too, that men struggle with appearing weak. And so for men, I feel like it's at a deeper root. Like it's harder to access, because I think you're right. Men have sort of a different sense of their own competence, and their identity comes from that. And they tend to be, I think, more attentive to their finances, because that's kind of their role that they're reinforced for, as being the provider. But I've worked with a lot of men in outplacement where they've been laid off, and that is very, very destabilizing to them, much more so than women, because it's a core part of their identity. So yeah, I do think it shows up differently for men and women, but I do think men and women have the same experience. It just shows up differently.
Yeah. So I think we should actually probably almost end on this note, because I think this was um, um, yeah, that I think we got to the core. Let's say like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or is
I
there
think that's
anything you
good.
wanted to add, or did I not ask something that you would like to say in this matter? Like, what would be your number one advice, for example, for somebody who struggles with paperwork and finances, and whether it's private finances or in the business? In the business, I think it's even, well, no, you can't say worse, but if you struggle in private finances, you're going to struggle in the business, because you kind of, it goes hand in hand. So what would
Yeah.
be your number one tip?
I think to be gentle with ourselves through the process. I mean, I think we're all
Hmm.
in different phases of exploring what money means in our lives and how we are going to express that, and how it's a reflection of our values. And I think this topic is so complex and so individual for
Yes.
people. There are threads and themes that are resonant for everyone. And there's also Alfred Adler is a psychologist, and he calls it private logic. And so I think that we all have our own little nuances, but
Yes.
they're, you know, to I'd say it's also just to find somebody that feels safe, like you, to work with around this, where, you know, it's like if you get triggered around shame or guilt, which I think are some of the strongest emotions that show up around money, that you can have an ally, you can have someone like you to process this with, so that you can look at what the root is and you can really uncover, so that in a safe place, so that you can move forward. And the other thing I want to emphasize about this too is I was realizing as I was reflecting on this interview and thinking about it too, is like, it seems like, oh, you know, like I'm really far along, and you know, um, and I feel like I'm a work in progress, and I'm proud of the work I've done around the money, and I've bounced checks, I have been in massive debt, and I feel like there's still a lot of growth for me in this arena, but it's really rewarding to dig into it, because once once I made changes here, it showed up in all the rest of my life. It showed
Hmm.
up in my weight. It showed up in the way I organize my home, the boundaries that I set with my family, um, and with people that are close to me. So it's really powerful work, and very, like, that's the word that I've been seeking more of in my life, is empowerment. And I feel like this work, looking at underlying money issues, it changes. It's a transformative process, and it
Yeah, so it
yeah.
has additional and surprising benefits to it in other areas of your life, which
Yeah.
sh- is actually more motivating than too. Like actually to start looking at it, and yeah. So
Yeah. So thank you for the work that you're doing. I think that it's really powerful, and it can have so much impact, and it's really needed. I'm really glad you're out
well, thank you very much. I just want to say I'm a work in progress too, and although I do have certain parts of money and organization really good under control, I struggle in other parts. Like we all have our little bundle to carry, and I think, but as long as we're looking at ourselves as a work in progress and we're actually trying to improve, and there's that quote, I forgot from whom it was, but it says the only person you have to be better off tomorrow is the person you are today, or you can say you have to be better today than you were yesterday. And I think as long as we're moving and we're kind of trying to improve and move into the right direction, we're good, like better than just hiding and not wanting to hear anything.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your time. It was really, really insightful and very interesting interview. Thank you very much, Maggie.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome.